meditation and psychedelics allow that kind of intuitive knowing. And then this is a better compass than the thinking mind. The thinking mind, if you pay attention to it, for most people, it's completely irrational. I mean, like, watch your thoughts for a day and tell me that it's not a crazy person, you know? Now it can do a lot of good, and it can solve a lot of problems. But we have this real deep wisdom in ourselves, and meditation and psychedelics can help you develop that and get more in tune with that. And then you're able to make decisions based more on what is in you instead of all these perceived expectations from outside of you.
Hi, this is Monica, The Conscious Shift. Welcome to episode 1 of Deep Dives. Deep Dives are conversations I have with people who have had interesting transformation and healing experiences. And today I'm speaking with Neil Markey. Neil is an ex-Army captain, McKinsey engagement manager, and private equity advisor. His story is a story of many. He followed the traditional path of success and didn't feel fulfilled. So we are investigating what Neil has done with this experience, how he navigated the decision of getting out of his corporate career, and with what outcome. Do follow The Conscious Shift here on YouTube and sign up to an email list on www.theconsciousshift.org to hear about other stories that may be educational and inspirational for us to have more fulfilling lives. Thank you for watching.
All right.
Right, we've got you now, Neil. How are you?
Good. How are you? Good to see you.
I'm all right. Good to see you too. So I was just introducing you briefly. So I was saying you come from the Army, strategy consulting, private equity, and you've recently made a very interesting shift, which I'd love for you to talk about, and for people to also get a little bit inspired, because so many people are on their journeys. So maybe before we jump into that, could you tell people how you got onto the Army? Because that's where your career started, right?
Yeah. I was an undergrad at Maryland, and I was studying math. Mm-hmm. I thought I was going to go work at the intelligence agencies. That's like the big employer of the Maryland math grads. And then September 11th happened when I was there, and I'll never forget the day. And I don't know how we even realized we could do it, but a group of us found out that you could get up to the top of the football stadium, and from there you could see the smoke coming from the Pentagon, and Wow. It was just wild. Mm. And I was dating a girl at the time whose dad was a really senior level officer at the Pentagon. Mm-hmm. And so that, was obviously a big thing in their lives. And mm-hmm. I started watching the news. I hadn't really cared about international affairs. I thought war was a thing of the past. But then I started kind of watching all the news shows and was just fascinated by it. And then, another day I'll never forget, my girlfriend at the time's dad realized that I was taking some interest in this and said, well, why don't you come to lunch with me at the Pentagon? And 2 days prior, I had been watching Chris Matthews' Hardball, and Paul Wolfowitz, who was the Undersecretary of Defense for Rumsfeld, was on. Mm-hmm. And I have different opinions about that whole group now, but at the time I thought, this guy's really sharp. I'm really impressed by the, kind of how articulate he was. And then a couple days later, I went to the Pentagon, and I ended up having lunch with him, and I was just hooked, line and sinker. And so I actually I left the school. I enlisted for a bit, and then came back and did the officer training program, and then went in as a lieutenant. Mm-hmm. So it was September 11th, no question.
September 11th. And how long did you stay in the Army? And what was the experience altogether? Why did you decide to get out?
Yeah, so I went in as an engineer officer, and I never spent a day in an engineer unit. I had an infantry platoon, and we went to Iraq mm-hmm. at the tail end of the surge, which was the Bush administration had a decision whether to kind of double down or to pull out. We doubled down. I was part of the double down.
Right.
And I had a group of 35 US soldiers that saluted me and called me sir, even though I was a kid. And I had an attached Iraqi platoon. So, I think I was 24 years old or something in Iraq during the Civil War, and it was wild. And the hardest thing was that by then we knew the weapons of mass destruction was all BS, right? So we were there, and we knew what we had done, and it was all for nothing. So it was really hard. So I was in the regular army, like the big army, and then I was fortunate enough to get asked to go try out for the Ranger Regiment, which is a really small special operations unit that does direct action missions, kind of targets high-level Al-Qaeda and Taliban leadership, and went to Afghanistan with them twice. And that was really exciting and adventurous. And I did believe in that mission. I thought that, there was really evil people out there that, needed to be handled. And the battalion I was in was Pat Tillman's battalion. He was killed by the time I got there, but his legend was everywhere. I mean, this guy was larger than life. He was the American football player, the Arizona Cardinal, that gave up his multi-million-dollar contract to join the service, and he was just he was a legend. And and then when I was there, Leroy Petrie got the Medal of Honor. So it was this really storied time to be there. And I mean, my level of service compared to the guys that were there and had been there before is nothing. So I was just humbled to be around these guys. But I mean, some of the battles that the 2nd Ranger Battalion was in, they're all still classified, many of them, but there'll be many of books and video and movies made about those brave men that I was close to just be at arm's distance too,
So it was very inspirational from what you were saying. You had a sort of something you believed in terms of helping the country, helping, I guess, bringing peace, I mean, that's what I would imagine drove a lot of you to go in.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a patriot, was a patriot. I guess I am a patriot. I believe that we were doing good when we had the whole run up to the Iraq War. I think most of the country believed what we were being told. It was really disheartening to get over there and realize that it had all been for naught, and people were getting hurt, and we were wasting time and resources. But the special operations mission, I think, is unique. It's very targeted. And I mean, my whole position on conflict and war is quite different now, but I don't know in the near future if we'll ever get to a place where there's not real evil in the world, and we have to have a strategy for that. So
sure. And so what in the end, what made you decide finally to leave the army, and why did you decide on strategy consulting then?
Well, so once you're in the Ranger Regiment as an officer, you can't move up without moving back into the regular army and then moving up. It's just kind of this rotational thing they have, so that the regiment sends officers back out into the regular army. It's supposed to improve the regular army. So for captains, you get to a point, it's like you either go back to the regular army or you get out. And my whole peer group, the vast majority of them had already done multiple deployments, and they were just worn out, and they didn't want to go back to the regular army because it's just a different level, a different caliber level. And I mean, most of my peers, got out and went to, the guys in front of me got out and went to really, impressive schools. So I was seeing guys do that. And then, yeah, it just seemed, it was the path, it was the the path that had the momentum. It was the path that was around me. It was guys were leaving the special operations community and going to Ivy League grad schools, and business was, I ended up getting into Columbia, and then I did an MBA and an MIA. And I did strategy consulting because that's what everybody else wanted to do, and everybody thought it was cool, and it was like the sexy thing. And I definitely had a history of just kind of going with the herd to whatever's the toughest or the coolest or something, and trying to prove myself there.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I don't regret it at all. It was a good experience. I learned a lot, but it's not my life's work. I mean,
Yes, I mean, how would you describe that experience? Because a lot of people, a lot of graduates end up going into that space of consulting, and private equity. Obviously, when you're a graduate, you don't really know any better. You trust, you trust other people's sort of judgment of things, and why shouldn't you, right? And then obviously once because there is no sort of common truth for everyone. It just depends on what it is that you like and enjoy and need. So what was your personal experience with it? What was your life like, when you were doing consulting and also private equity after?
well, my whole road after grad school, I was an entrepreneur for a couple of years. I started a business with my brother that he still runs full time, and then
Mm-hmm.
I had been deferring McKinsey and kicking my job offer, and it got to the second or third deferral, and I said, "Can I defer again? I want to keep working on this business." And they were like, "Look, man, we love you, but we're not going to be your like permanent backup plan. It's ridiculous." I was like, "Okay, this is fair. That's a fair point." So then I went to McKinsey, and it was a mixed bag. I have a lot of respect for McKinsey. It is an extremely high caliber, high performing environment, and it's a really amazing people. Um, and I got to work all over the world. I mean, I got to work in Australia. I got to work in South Africa. I got to work all over the United States and Central America. I actually went back to the intelligence community for a little stint in there, which was quite interesting. So it was adventurous,
Mm-hmm.
and I tell this story sometimes, but I was on a team of six, and two of them were Rhodes Scholars out of six. My one of my partners that I really liked, senior partners there was number one in his class at Stanford in chemical engineering for a PhD program, and then he's thinking about business problems. So there was people that were just wicked smart there, and that was fun to be around. I was always the dumbest person in the room. Like I was always when the Rangers was always the weakest person in the room, and that's fine. It's like good growth opportunity. But you know, I lost my way again. I had this period in grad school where I had found meditation and had found plant medicine, and I think was living a bit more in sync. And my
Mm-hmm.
McKinsey years ended up being kind of what got me off track, just because it was,
Mm-hmm.
everybody's thinking about money, everybody's thinking about, climbing the corporate ladder and prestige and the work. I at the end of the day, a lot of what the big consultancies do is they make wealthy people wealthier, right? I hate to say it, and you could argue that for decades there was some, public good that came out of it because we developed new technologies and efficiencies and stuff. But now we're just getting to the point of where we're squeaking out a 0.5% that's going all to the top, and a lot of times it's at the expense of it. A lot of times at the expense of workers, right? And it's just tough, and that's part of the reason I'm doing what I'm doing now. Is I feel like collectively we need a collective shift here. We need a conscious shift because we're just in a different phase of human development and industrialization and technology, and we have to kind of change our approach, or
Yeah,
just
that growth, it just can't go on forever, right? I mean, it's, every single company, if you think about why it exists, the purpose of it being, to bring more profits to the shareholders. Like how long, this in itself, as you said, there was a period of time where it made sense, but I think we are at a point where, in order to grow for many companies, it's the cost cutting exercises are really brutal.
yeah, yeah, and it's just, I don't know, like if you like Thomas Piketty's book on capitalism. It's just the way the equations are, right? It's that simple. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
people that own the capital gets return on the capital.
Yeah.
So if you run that indefinitely, it maximizes capital to the people that had it in the first place. It's just like the way the
Yes.
math works. Now, the whole system isn't necessarily broken. It just needs more balance. And what we're seeing in Western democracies is we're just further down the path. So we're just seeing some of these things now that if we don't make some real change are going to be completely unsustainable probably in our lifetime. So we gotta wake up a bit.
Yeah, for sure. So what did your life look like, Neil, when you were in consulting and private equity? So obviously something sort of pushed you towards, a slightly different path, which we will get onto in a moment. But, I just want people to sort of understand what your life looked like and how did you feel in it?
Yeah, I mean, part of it was a mixed bag. Part of it was really fun and exciting. I was young. I was, you could take you were flying first class a lot of times. You were doing this. I was just like doing sitting in boardrooms with executives and pretending like I knew I had a clue what was going on. And yeah, I got to travel all over the world. So it was really exciting. And then the work, a lot of times, I would say the vast majority of my work was fascinating to me. It was like these big, huge, ambiguous problems, and we would just wrestle them and make sense of it. My favorite thing was you'd get these analysts, these brand new, young 22-year-olds out of Harvard undergrad that just were so smart and so motivated. And I would intentionally, like when I was started to like run teams, I would intentionally like throw these big, like I would have a problem and I wouldn't even have a beginning in my mind about like kind of where to even start with it. And I'd throw it to one of these kids and be like, spend a day or two on this and come back. And they'd come back with this like report and with recommendations and synthesis. And it just was like, it was really fun to work with some of the people there. But I lost balance. I stopped taking care of myself physically. I had been meditating very regularly, but been very disciplined for a few years, but that kind of fell to the wayside, even though I was still teaching it, which was funny, a little hypocritical. And then the stress of the work, it's so high paced. You take these really motivated individuals and then you put them in together and they keep trying to one up each other. So it's this frantic environment of people trying to outperform. And and then you your sleep suffers. A lot of people go, start using alcohol more regularly. And then, I mean, some of my most unfit years were there. And then private equity was arguably even worse or more stressful and intense, because what we were doing was partnering with big private equity firms, usually taking some investment in portfolio companies like $100 million companies, but they're ones that were like near bankruptcy or had just come through bankruptcy. So the board is fighting each other, all of the executive teams fighting each other, and my boutique firm that was a bunch of ex-McKinsey folk would take us and drop us in as like a chief transformation officer or an interim CEO. And we would just have to go in there and figure it out. And it was just like, I mean, it was nuts. It was so toxic. I mean, it was just, I mean, you can make a lot of money doing it, but it is heartless work. And I'll never forget this day when I was in New York at a board meeting and it was super contentious. I mean, we had just gotten there, but the business was way behind, and it was like going to go to bankruptcy. And we just opened up a spreadsheet. We were like, we're going to do this live. And we just started talking through like all of the head count on the spreadsheet, just like numbers. And I just remember being like, God, man, this is people, and now you can make a very rational argument that doing some of that work is good because it's better than a company going out of business and you got to liquidate and everybody loses their jobs. But what I know for sure is that's not my work, right? Like it just doesn't align with who I am, and it's just, so that's why I had to make a change.
Well, what I find interesting, Neil, is that, I mean, you ended up in like these environments that were all battlefields, every single one of them. right? So there was something in there that obviously was sort of familiar,
Yeah.
and as you just said, not quite aligned with your true values. But I think it's very hard, in our society to actually know what our values are, because we're never encouraged, to do that exercise. We are encouraged to follow a certain path
Right.
that is considered successful, right? So if you are, if you're able, if you're capable, if you're smart, there is a path for you there that you're sort of encouraged to take. And it just looks to me like that's kind of what happened to you as well. You sort of, you followed those paths that were commonly, sort of accepted as, successful paths. Because, how do you know? But it's interesting how you got to this point where, you had these reflections, right? Where you were thinking, okay, this is not me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and yeah, you said successful, right? Like that word needs to be defined, as successful in terms
Yes.
of what. And
Yes.
yeah, I think it kind of, a lot of it stemmed from this kind of personal emptiness or insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're operating from that place, you're kind of grabbing at straws to fill things
Yeah.
up, and you want to do the things that are most known in, like by your peer group, that say, no, I'm capable. No, I'm smart.
Yes.
No, I've made it. Right. So,
Yes.
um, but whoa, sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Um, so I mean, yeah, I kind of got just to I guess a bit of a breaking point. I was
Mm.
really fortunate in my family lives a very humble life. My father is an artist. He's a
Mm-hmm.
blacksmith. My mom's an artist. Like, um, so I didn't grow up with much, and I really resented it because all my friends had all these things. But I did understand there was like a different way of living that wasn't consumerism, materialism, trying to kind of just like get a lot of stuff. I didn't believe in it. I thought it was silly and embarrassing, right? But it was in me. And
Yeah.
then yeah, I had this period of awareness in graduate school when I was doing the practices, like when I was really disciplined in meditation and started using
Mm-hmm.
plant medicine, where I started to realize, I started to question some of these things, that like the momentum and the perceived cultural expectations.
Yeah.
Um, but then I lost my way. I got pulled back into it. So it's a big life lesson for me to know now how much I need community and like-minded people around me that think differently. Because if you just throw yourself back into those environments, it's really hard. We're humans. We want to conform, and all the conversations are in one direction. So it's hard. So now I'm really
Yeah.
conscious about how and where I spend my time and who.
I mean, everything that you're saying resonates even so much more these days. You know that. I mean, it is one of those things where it is really hard to see, to have a perspective when you are just in something and you don't know what's outside of that, right?
Right.
And the
Yeah.
kind of people and friends that we surround ourselves with, very often it's predicated on where we come from, which school we go to, and where we work. And actually it's very rare that we end up thinking, why am I friends with this person, and actually what do I value in friendships, right?
Right.
What it is that I want to surround myself with, and also what it is that I want to give. And I think I've only just started to be much more intentional about this, and
Yeah.
so what you were saying really resonates. And
Yeah.
and I've had like a similar journey myself, so I do understand where you're coming from. I'm
Yeah.
really curious to understand, like, so what got you interested in meditation? And you mentioned also plant medicines. How did you sort of go into that, and how did it start to, I guess, help you understand what was happening?
Yeah. My dad was a meditator. So I
Mm-hmm.
grew up a little bit around. I don't think I ever tried it as a kid. But my dad did like kind of Tai Chi, Qigong exercise. And I spent some time in China when I was a kid, and it was these contemplative practices. So I saw them. I was like leery of them. I thought it was a bit woo-woo, a bit silly, but I think that probably was in me. And then actually, one of the first times in my adult life I saw meditators, I was in Kandahar, Afghanistan, and the Rangers, when they would get ready to go out on mission, would like play loud music and get really pumped, and we would work with some of the other tier 1 special operations units, or they would share bases with us. And the Delta guys I got to know in the gym, and all the Rangers looked up to the Delta guys, right? These were like the pros, man. These were the real deal dudes. And I had gotten to know a couple of them from the gym because we'd all work out together and eat together and stuff. And I had just come to go, I like dropped off a mission brief or something at one of the ready rooms to one of the captains that was going to take the guys out. And all the Rangers were like loading magazines. It was just like, you could smell it. It was like so intense. And I came back around the jock, and the two of the guys that I knew really well, Delta guys, were just sitting in their chairs with their eyes closed, and they were meditating. And I was like, that's interesting. But I still was like, it's still silly. These guys are just like, whatever. And then when I was in graduate school, I was miserable. I had just ruined a marriage. I had like to this amazing woman, but I wasn't emotionally connected and had PTSD. And I was really looking to solve my happiness, because I had this moment where I was like, I'd been a pretty highly ranked officer in the special operations community. I was in Ivy League graduate school, and I had at this point received a summer internship for McKinsey, which is like, most people I would say would say Neil's doing well here, but I was so miserable. I was drinking a lot. I was I just wasn't connected. My relationships had struggled. And see, oh boy, here comes some of the Rangers here. Watch this here. So it was in graduate school. I really was trying to fix my own unhappiness. I was just miserable, and I was like, but all the things in my life are okay. Like I'm doing well, yeah. But I had this emptiness, and I found meditation, and I really loved MBSR, which is mindfulness-based stress reduction, because it was developed by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, and he studied in the East under a lot of Buddhist practitioners and was a doctor, and saw the powerful benefit, but was like, I can't bring it back with the spirituality. I've got to strip it all out. So he intentionally pulled it all out and just made it's really practical and pragmatic, and it's science-based and clinically studied. So I got deep on that, and I started going on Vipassana retreats, and I started going into Central Park and meditating for like half a day by myself. People were like, what's Neil doing? Oh, here we go. The texts are coming through now. And then, yeah, that's kind of when I started getting back into plant medicine too. I took took a trip to Costa Rica, and that's, like you say, we're very like habitual, most of what we do on a daily basis is just kind of pre-programmed thought pattern, this habit. And meditation and psychedelics, I think meditation and psychedelics are like inextricably linked. And if you look at a lot of indigenous cultures and spiritual practices throughout the world, they're like this, right? Yeah. But what they do is they allow you to zoom out. So like you said, if you're in the machine and you're just like running, you really get pigeonholed, especially when your central nervous system's in fight or flight, and you're just running. If you are able to zoom out, then you can kind of see the picture more holistically and make better decisions. Oh yeah,
Neil, can you turn on the light? It got a little dark where you are. Meditation and psychedelics, they help you sort of zoom out and like see the bigger picture.
Yeah, and you just develop this. So we have a thinking mind, right? Yeah. That was more recently developed in our evolution. But it's not all of us, right? We have a subconscious and we have a central nervous system that actually are really wise. And I know you know this, but like there's a lot of research coming around like the body keeps the score. And if you look at the autonomic nervous system, there's 4 branches that go from body to brain and only 1 that goes from brain to body. So there's so much knowledge and wisdom and history in our body, but we are in the Western world just solely focused on the thinking mind.
Yes.
And meditation and psychedelics allow that kind of intuitive knowing. And then this is a better compass than the thinking mind. The thinking mind, if you pay attention to it, for most people it's completely irrational. I mean, like, watch your thoughts for a day and tell me that it's not a crazy person, you know. Now it can do a lot of good, and it can solve a lot of problems, but we have this real deep wisdom in ourselves, and meditation and psychedelics can help you develop that and get more in tune with that, and then you're able to make decisions based more on what is in you instead of all these perceived expectations from outside of you. And that's important, right?
Totally. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. But so after you left McKinsey and private equity, what did you do? How did you sort of pivot at that point?
Well, I always had this idea in my mind, right? I knew that I just needed to find my purposeful work, and at this point, I was like, I know I don't need the material things. Such a fool's errand, right? It's just like a sugar diet. It's like the more you eat, the more you need, and and I was just watching it all around me. I was like, no, I got live your life within balance and with some purpose curriculum a couple times. So I knew that I needed to find a path that was going to bring me some internal contentment instead of just like things. And yeah, I left, and I moved to Mexico because they have a real history of a lot of psychedelics are more legal there than they are in the States. And the Huichol and the Aztecs and the Mayans, they've been using meditation and plant medicine and ceremony and nature and breath work for millennia, right? And they don't have depression or anxiety disorders, or they're so content and happy. So I went to Mexico thinking I'm gonna go poke around a bit, and things started coming together. I just started, I wrote like a paper, I guess you could say, on what I was up to and how I was seeing the world, and I just started sending it to people, and half of my friends would write me back and be like, okay, Neil's like full off the deep end, but enough of them were like, keep going, I like this. And now it's coming together. We've run some retreats, we've taught some digital programs, we have more retreats in the fall.
So you basically set up a wellness business. Basically.
Just, it's all the stuff that I found. I love this intersection of like consciousness and neuroscience and individual wellness. I mean, I think if I look at the world and I look at like all our big macro issues out there, climate change, the political environment in the United States, violence, this is like, you think, the strategist in me is like, okay, how do you even try and make sense of this, right? After I got 40 years left and I want to have some impact, it's like, how do you start cutting this thing up and doing something and to help? And every way I came at it, I was like, it's individual transformation, it's mindset shift, right? There's structural things that need to happen, but you're not going to get there unless it's the person in the position that has influence and power starts to see the world differently. And so I was like, we got to shift mindsets at scale. So, okay, so how do we do that? Well, I think we're working on this program to help people be able to zoom out. And it's not like an intellectual exercise as much as it is getting people to, we're all connected in this thing, whether we want to be or not, right? And if you look at the quantum mechanics and you look at some of the growing research, there's this fabric, there's this field. We are all very, very, very linked. And we need to have people that can feel that more, right? So we can and develop this sense of empathy and understanding so that we can actually discuss things. So to me, that this individual, balance and alignment and personal wellness is foundational to everything. We have to figure out a way to help people find that for themselves.
So you're basically creating these experiences for people to go and feel those things. And I suppose, right? It's I guess, what do you think you particularly, with your business, what it is that you want to bring, that's new or different,
Yeah.
into those people's lives.
Yeah. Well, we're going right after the type A overachievers, right? So we're going right to the banks and the law firms and these tech entrepreneurs and consultants. And because to me, again, if I think about it like big picture,
Yeah.
we don't need to save the artists or the teachers or the
Yes.
musicians, right? Like there are lots of people that are living in alignment and have balance and this internal
Yeah.
happiness, and they're not living a consumer materialistic life,
Yeah.
and it's gravy. But if we and this is over general, I'm
Of
generalizing here,
course.
but
Of course.
uh, but if you look at the big, capitalism where it's kind of like really, really run long and it's gotten like really concentrated and it's become this almost this like new mindset, we got to go there. So
Yeah.
I think the team that we have, which is mostly special operations folks and, successful business people, can go in there and talk to those people with some level of credibility and demystify and de-woo-woo some of these non-Western practices,
Hmm.
right? And then, so that's kind of where we're targeting. And I mean, I would say our programming is a bit different. We do a lot of the basic individual, like it's a very heavy meditation, right?
Hmm.
Because to me that is in a league of its own.
Yeah.
But then we do breath work and sound healing and digital detox and just be getting people in nature and group therapy. But we also teach like these intellectual modules.
Hmm.
So, Dr. Aaron, he teaches a lot of these for us, but the basics of the central nervous system is like one of our modules. So to me, and I think for this demographic we're going after, it's really good to understand the mechanics of what's going
Yeah.
on, right? The sympathetic, the parasympathetic, the fight or flight. Because
Yeah.
again, if I look big picture, in the United States, we are all collectively in fight or flight, no question. We
All the
all
time.
all the time. Right now, it's a
Yeah.
spectrum, and but we are all triggered. We're all
Yeah.
like very primed and ready to react, and then that's why we have all these things that we have.
And we do.
So
We do react. Yeah.
yeah, we do, right, and so getting people to understand what their body is doing when
Hmm.
they're in this fight or flight and how the mechanics of it and like the why we're going to do meditation and the why we're going to get in nature is really important. We have another intellectual module, so there's like some base level of understanding I think people need to have around this stuff. It's like why do we do what we do when we know what we know? So it's almost like a psychology 101 refresher where it's like
Hmm.
thinking mind, subconscious brain, ego, self-talk. Okay, let's bring a new, we probably all know this, but like you can bring awareness kind of to the top, and then you can do these experiential things, do the work. And I find, and I think others agree, that were very complementary.
Absolutely. And are you thinking of, targeting individuals, from those areas you mentioned, or also corporates? Because I wonder, what's your view on, would corporates be
Well,
interested for
so,
people to, change
so
those
okay,
paradigms?
so so we are selling digital programs to corporates. Obviously, I'm not giving people mushrooms or DMT through the computer yet. I don't know. Maybe we'll get there one day. So, but these basic individual wellness practices you can actually teach pretty well
Yeah.
remotely.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, I was kind of against it at first, and then we started doing it. I was like, oh, this actually works, and it's easier to scale. So that
Yeah.
we sell that stuff to corporations. The retreats we're selling to individuals, right?
Hmm.
So we're gonna we're not ready yet to go try and market to top teams kind of full out to come down, because there's a whole nother level of risk that
Yeah.
businesses have to consider than individuals. However, with that said, I think we're going to get there, because if you just look at alcohol, right? I love this chart I can send. It is a 2010 study from the UK about drug harm. And
Hmm.
basically our perceptions are just so out of whack, right? Like if you look at the research and you look at the data, alcohol is the thing you need to be worried about. And we could do that in our companies all the time, right? So we get people together and people get drunk and it's funny,
Yes.
and but that you tuning out, you're not getting any you're not getting much benefit there. But
Yeah, the
I
amount of
think that,
stupid things that people do at like work Christmas parties,
right, right. I have some friends that run smaller kind of entrepreneurial ventures that are really interested in coming down with their teams, because
Mm,
if you can do this work together, and top team effectiveness to me,
yeah.
it's so much about vulnerability and being
Yes.
able to be connect and like understand and have empathy and be present.
Yeah.
So yeah, get people together and work through this stuff with a team, and then think about the business with like a really fresh set of eyes and kind of like more heart centered. I mean, yeah, I think we're going to move there. And that's the vision here, I think.
I love to see it. I would love to see it. And, that is a great direction. Very ambitious one. And, but there are enough people out there who think similarly. And those are the kind of people that I guess, you need to get on board, right? And,
Yeah.
and start showing the example.
Yep.
Um,
We're at the beginning of the curve, right? So
yeah,
we don't need to be broad market appeal today. We need
no,
the small niche passionate ones, and they exist more. The number
yeah,
of people that have reached out to me now saying they want to come, do some peyote with the Huichol people in Mexico together, is like, you can't count them, because well, I think there's a lot of things happening that are pushing people. I think COVID
yep,
collectively brought us to this
yep.
level of where people are like, I'm going to lose it. I just read a study the other week. 46% of Americans could either be diagnosed with a depressive or anxiety related disorder. I mean,
That is
we,
so many.
yeah, right. I look at my peers that have really good educations and are doing really well financially, but they're like, the more they make, the more they spend, and now, they're like, they're so hooked, and they're not necessarily, they know that something's missing. So it's just people looking to make a change.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very difficult to know what you're missing if you haven't experienced it. So if you
Yeah,
haven't felt it, if you want to change something, you have to feel it first. And that's what you're talking about, those experiences of meditation, of plant medicines, breath work. That's what
yeah,
they allow people to do, is to enter into those states of expanded consciousness, of no body states, right? And they're able, you're able to actually feel something bigger. And which is the
exactly.
point where I wanted to actually ask you about one of your memorable experiences that maybe, that you've had, whether it's, with breath work or plant medicines or meditation or any other modality that really kind of like gave you some powerful insight, or like, allowed you to shift something in your life.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them, right? I've been kind of doing this for 10 years now, so there's a lot of them, and many of them have been like very special. And um, I mean, one I would say was one of the first times I tried DMT,
Hmm.
where I still had quite a bit of anxiety, right? And not, just about like work and finances and stuff. Even
Yeah,
though objectively I was fine, I just still had a lot of
yeah,
anxiety around it. But I had this very clear, not, again, not intellectual thing, but very just internal knowing of everything's going to be okay. And
right.
that is huge, right? Because if you really feel like everything's going to be okay, then you're making decisions from a completely different place, right? So that was a really profound one. Um, I I had a really profound one, 7 years ago, where I took a like very, very, very significant dose of LSD and laid in a bed for 12 hours with a blindfold on, listening to music. And um, yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by this stuff. I'm fascinated by consciousness. I think it's good for us. I think it's this new phase of development that we're embarking on. Um, and then, I mean, meditation, my favorite kind of meditation is like these body scan kind of energy center meditations. But often, a couple times a week, I'll have a very profound sense of stillness
Hmm.
and just this sense of being connected to everything. And that's like a really
Hmm.
nice thing to feel.
Absolutely. And when people, so, a lot of people sort of obviously hear about meditation and maybe try it a little bit, but it doesn't, they don't feel like they're doing it
Mm.
right. what would you say to them? Because obviously you teach meditation, you practice it a lot. What would you say to people in terms of how to do it?
Anybody that says that they can't meditate should just give me a call, because it's a misperception. Everybody can meditate, but there's this perception that to meditate we need to push things out, and that's just not what it is. It's just awareness of the present moment. You just pick something to focus on, and then the thinking mind does what it does, which is runs away, goes to the future, the past, calculates, judge, measures, and that's okay. But when you notice that it's done that, you bring it back to the breath. So it's so many people I've met, they're like, my mind is too busy, I can't meditate. And they're just thinking about it wrong. It's actually really, really straightforward. So I think once people have that little bit of a shift and learn the basics, but here's the thing that's unfortunate, or maybe it's fortunate, but we as Westerners really like quick fixes, and we want to like take the pill or just like have the life hack type thing. Unfortunately, meditation is like the opposite of that. So it takes discipline, and a lot of the research is around MBSR, and 8 weeks is when you can start to see like very measurable changes in the brain, and there's like all these really cool studies that show just how impactful meditation can be. But that takes a disciplined practice for a couple months. So I think the other problem is like where fitness, it's very similar to fitness. Like you can't get strong one day in the gym. But with fitness, I can show you a fit person, and we're very visual creatures. So everybody's like, okay, yeah, I want that. That's great.
And you can measure it, right? You can weigh it.
Yeah, it's way easier to measure. It's way easier to talk about. We have language for it. But showing someone a fit or healthy mind, or like how it permeates in their relationships, it's just harder to do. And everybody to meditate is making some trade-off. You're giving up sleep or time with people or whatever. So this is like my life's mission, is to try and convince people that it's the best thing they can do for themselves and for the people around them, is try and find the time in the day to do the work, to be centered and in tune. And there's all these like medical benefits that are like clearly documented. Like it is just so overwhelmingly clear. It's not, the reality is drug companies can't make a lot of money off meditation. So they own the schools, and they own they lobby in arms. So we collectively kind of just like push this stuff aside, even though it's so well documented, the medical benefit. But then there's also this for the folks that if you meditate for a while, you start to, like, the world that we operate in can shift based on your awareness and your thoughts. And that's a pretty fun and interesting thing to start to see. But then if you look at the mechanics of that, if you start look at the science of that too, there's real good reason that, we're starting to really understand why that might be. So I big proponent of meditation.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, I think it's like, it's like when you're asked, okay, so like what did you learn, using psychedelics, or like what were the insights, and a lot of those things that we say, like for instance, you mentioned, the feeling of stillness and connection with everything around you, the feeling that everything's going to be okay. I mean, they sound pretty banal. Like they sound pretty like, oh, like there was nothing more, nothing more sort of transformative. But actually, I think what's sort of missing in words is the feeling of it all, right?
100%.
And it's the experience and the feeling that makes a huge difference. And I think Buddhists actually say that enlightenment feels like freedom. It feels like liberation. And what you're describing is basically sort of cutting the cords that we've all created, to those stories and narratives that are supposedly here to make us happy, but they're not working. And so, meditation or breath work or plant medicines, they are just these ways for us to zoom out and then see, what experience those things that you were talking about. And I think this is where it's tricky to really talk to people about this, if, you know, if someone hasn't experienced even that moment of, you know, transcendence or connection, it's really hard to explain.
Yeah, it is. And part of what's happening there too, I believe, is it's a thinking mind versus a central nervous system, subconscious, like full being thing. We're just so ever indexed on the thinking mind that we look at everything through that, right?
Yeah.
We didn't always used to be that way. That's one of the most recent parts of our brain is the thinking mind. If you look at animals, like a dog or something, right, we actually have all the same senses. We're like very similar to like a lot of other animals, but they don't have that part of the brain, and so they're in the present moment all the time,
Yeah.
and they feel. That's the thing, is the thinking mind, when it's overactive, will drown out the stuff that's coming from the body, which is the feeling and the emotion, and we need that. And it's not that the thinking mind is inherently bad, it's just that it can become out of balance, and they need to be in balance, and the thinking mind needs to be a tool, not the leader. And for myself included, a lot of us, again, we are unique, and the rest of the world collectively is catching up. But this Western way of thought with the scientific method, and this is a newer thing, right? And we're dealing with it running to its kind of conclusion.
Yeah, I think this is what it started with Descartes in France, right? He was like, I think, therefore I am, and everyone just got, oh my God, the thinking mind,
Yeah.
And I think,
well, that was the same time that the scientific method was developed, right? And the scientific method's great, and I'm not saying by any stretch that there's nothing great about it. But what happened, if you look at the history, is anything that we couldn't prove in a lab or on a chalkboard or recreate got pushed out of normal society. It were kind of like in our government and like our companies, and this real quick.
You
It was
disappeared for a
pushed to
second.
spirit, right? And I think those communities, the churches, the spiritual communities or whatever, were in some balance for a while, but the thinking mind took the momentum, right, and developed all the capital and the money. So we've gotten a bit out of whack. But we need that. We need that spirit. We need that connection. We need that the emotion and the feelings. And so much of this work that we're doing is, a lot of it is teaching, reminding people how to feel again, right? Because we're just conditioned. We're not good at it.
No, and it's literally just like running on a treadmill, right? Not knowing how to stop, how to get out of there. And I think with the work that you're doing, it's just like pulling people, grabbing them by the collar, and bringing them to this space that they didn't have to think about, what they were going to do. You're creating that space, and you're allowing them, I guess, to have those experiences then.
That's right. That's exactly
Great
right.
work. Great work, Neil. Thank you so much for sharing all of
Thank
that.
you.
I'm sure we'll be seeing exciting developments as you're on the journey.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.